Hello. Thank you for clicking on this video. This is going to be an update on this server and the most recent upgrades I have given it. There's going to be two topics. First one is going to be the hardware for the NAS. There's not going to be any software operating systems, but I'm done with the hardware. So these are two baskets containing 4 HDDs each, an SSD, and there's going to be, not in this video, but there's going to be a true NAS operating system installed on it. I have also redone the air intake system in a bid to make it a bit more silent, although there's less airflow and it's going to require a little bit of testing to ensure that I don't overheat any of the systems. That said, it is pleasantly quiet. It's two 180mm fans that come from a very old computer case of mine, and it runs very silently. I can sleep in the same room as that stuff. Before going on with the video, I'd like to recontextualize a little bit the goal of the project. So I have all of these very old computers that came my way through work. They range in between 8 and 12 years of age, so they're quite old. And I would like to have a setup that allows me to tinker with them. On the super long term, I would like to have fun with some Kubernetes that's multi-node, database replication, CI/CD, test automation, plenty of fun stuff. On the shorter term, because these computers are in my room, I would like a setup that allows me to manage dust, heat and sound better than if I'd just piled all of the computers on a shelf, which would work. But I'd like something better, hence the DIY server project. Also, to make matters a little bit more complicated, I'm quite broke at the moment and will be for the foreseeable future, and a total novice when it comes to a whole lot of these subjects. So if ever you have suggestions, if ever you have recommendations or comments, by all means, please do leave them in the comments. I'm very interested. Let's get going. To begin working with the NAS, I wanted to address the part that was giving me the most difficulty, the hard drives. Previously, I had attempted to design my own hard drive holder, but it turned out to be a failure. So I wanted to use the HDD racks that were already within computers that I had previously disassembled. The main issue with these HDD racks is that they offered no obvious way of allowing me to incorporate them into my tray system. So in the end, I decided that I'd remove the front cover and drill through the top to attach them to my trays. Not the best solution, but best I could come up with. For the computer that is going to be running the NAS, I chose one that had a motherboard called the GA-X58A UD3R, because although it has a very, very old first generation i7-920 processor, it also happens to have 10 SATA ports, which was quite the advantage in this very specific case. I also found on eBay some Fujitsu 9211 8i 6GB a second HBA LSI FW, but they won't be there for quite some time and I wanted to go on with the project, so I selected that motherboard. The computer used my previous mounting system, which was the back plate of the computer case that I'd cut out and used as a mount, and instead replaced it with the 3D printed one, which in turn would allow much easier installation of the HDD racks. I spent a little over 3 hours just for the preparation and the mounting part, not counting all of the planning aspects, trying to figure out what could go where and how. And the end result is honestly a little bit less than satisfactory. I did a few mistakes and it was way too much work. I do think for the next iterations I'm going to be 3D printing something that I would have designed myself. Here is a schematic to show a little bit more what is going on. So It's on the side. You can see the HDD rack, the motherboard on top, the aluminum plate upon which everything is put, the aluminum support to hold the plate nice and straight, the screws that hold the HDD rack into the aluminum plate, and the HDDs. The HDDs need to be inserted through the back to accommodate for the fan that's sitting in the front, and although the first three HDDs can be put in normally, the fourth one needs to be put in before the third to accommodate for the aluminum support. It also cannot be the maximum height of an HDD as the screws on top do need a little bit of clearance. Speaking of the fans, that was yet another mistake. They are supposed to be inserted from the top of the HDD rack into it, but that part is now blocked by the aluminum plate. So I had to resort to hot gluing the fans to the front of the HDD racks. The HDDs that you see me put into the system are old 500 gigabyte HDDs, so I'm not going to be doing any records with them, but hey, they were free. I replaced the original power supply unit with a spare modular one that I had. This in turn gave me enough connectors to power all of the HDDs. And to ensure a minimum of speed on this old system, I added an SSD 120 gigabytes that would house the operating system. As you might have guessed, just like the rest of this project, making the holes for the air intake bigger didn't go to plan either. The previous fans I was using were these 120mm crypto mining fans, which were really efficient but also unbelievably noisy. So what I decided I'd do is I'd repurpose these two old 180mm fans that I had from a very, very old computer case that I had, but I figured, hey, they don't make much sound and they should have enough airflow, so why not give it a try? Also, I think I was tired when I did the measurements and I must have measured the outer ring because I measured the fans to be 190mm even though they're 180, so that's going to cause me problems further down the line also. A bit off center, as you can see. This is where I measured, this is where I wanted to start cutting, and then it just started cutting to the side. And my guess is because the drill bit didn't have anything to bite into as I was drilling into an already existing hole. It was almost impossible to keep on target. Anyway, once I was done realizing that I'd have to re-drill quite a few holes to correct that mistake, I ended up decleaning and moved to the fan assembly. In regards to the fans, I decided that I'd be using two. I'm well aware that putting two fans one on top of the other doesn't give you twice the power, but it's also better than just having one fan. Since the fans are intended to be a somewhat permanent fixture of this DIY server, I decided that I'd do some soldering on the cables. So the fans themselves have got no soldering at all, but it's the part that links them to the power supply. That said, I haven't done soldering in a long time, and that became painfully obvious when trying to mishmash everything together. I was successful in the end, but it was a bit painful. I had also prepared some shrink sleeves to make sure that there wouldn't be any exposed electrical components, but because I forgot to put them in advance, I simply resorted to dousing the whole thing in hot glue to make sure that nothing was exposed. Because I didn't have any screws long enough to hold both fans at once one to the other, I had to offset them just slightly so that I could screw the bottom one and have the second one be held onto the first with hot glue. Not perfect, but it worked. The next step was to simply change the filter from the previous holder to the new version that I designed, compatible with the new 180mm fans. Now that I have everything that was required, I could install the new fan system, try to align them well, and drill the new holes as needed. The new end result of this DIY server only has 6 computers. I had to remove one to make place both for the HDD baskets of the NAS and the fans for the air intake. I could redesign the shelves to be 1/3 more compact, and thus allowing me to have up to 8 computers total inside of the DIY server. That said, I am not sure the fans are sufficient for the 6 computers that are still left. So I need to first stress test everything, make sure that everything runs at a reasonable temperature, and only then will I look into increasing the computer count. Here is a sound test with absolutely no filters. The sound is really low, much less so than the regular fan that I usually have running in my room. The next test is a very simple airflow test, and this is where I may have a problem, because although they're much quieter, and even though I have 2 of them, they're not moving as much as the previous fan was. As I said, I'll have to do a bit of testing to see if that's a problem or not. Thanks a lot for watching this video. In the next episode of this journey of building my own server, I'm going to be installing a free NAS operating system on the NAS hardware, so that's going to be an adventure. And I'm also going to be looking into using a custom Pi KVM to control it remotely. This is going to allow me to do the very first stress tests, and if all goes to plan, I'll be editing the next episode using the NAS in question, because the current NAS that I'm using, a Synology, is completely saturated. I've got no more space for these videos, so NAS out of necessity. Thanks again for watching, and see you soon.